Janet Yellen. She is currently the U.S. Treasury Secretary. She was, before this, the chair of the Federal Reserve from 2004 to 2018. She was the vice chair, 2014 to 2018. She was the vice chair prior to that, and she's worked her way up the ranks her entire life of the Federal Reserve. And again, now she's the Treasury Secretary. So she's like in between the Fed and the administration today as the Treasury Secretary. I don't understand this woman. I don't understand how she is in a position of authority. I don't understand how she is never criticized. Have you ever heard Janet Yellen criticized? She used to be the head of the Fed and she's the Treasury Secretary. Our economy is awful and I never hear her name. And I think it's because she looks like a sweet old grandma. Doesn't she? She looks like she'll just grab your cheeks and make you some apple pie and won't let you leave her house until you eat something already. That's Janet Yellen. But don't be deceived. She is unbelievably incompetent. No doubt well-credentialed. She went to Brown, Yale, Harvard, taught at the London School of Economics, Berkeley. But she's wrong about all the things we pay her to be right about. She was head of the Fed. And she's so amazing, apparently, that we had to bring her back as the Treasury Secretary at the age of 75. It makes no sense to me. You're telling me there's no one else more qualified in the whole country to be the Treasury Secretary than this 75-year-old woman? Who's wrong all the time, and here she is admitting she was wrong about inflation.
Certainly, as the president says, inflation is the #1 domestic economic problem facing the United States right now. But it wasn't just the president who got it wrong a year or so ago. I want to play for you what you said about inflation last year. Listen to this.
Is there a risk of inflation? I think there's a small risk, and I think it's manageable. I don't anticipate that inflation is going to be a problem, but it is something that we're watching very carefully.
Was it a mistake, Madam Secretary, to downplay this inflation risk? Did that contribute to the problems we're all seeing right now?
Well, look, I think I was wrong then about the path that inflation would take. As I mentioned, there have been unanticipated and large shocks to the economy that have boosted energy and food prices and supply bottlenecks that have affected our economy badly that I at the time didn't fully understand.
Ridiculous. Blaming Putin and the ports as opposed to printing $13 trillion, which is more than we've spent on the last 13 wars we've fought combined. That had nothing to do with it. It's Putin and the ports. Unbelievable. And I guess, like, some people give her some credit for admitting she was wrong. Yeah, I guess. But anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together could have seen inflation coming. It was obvious as could ever be. You can't print and spend more money in 2 years than you've spent in the last 100 years and not have inflation. You don't get to be wrong on that and then say whoopsie. You know what I mean? Like up. You know. Whoops. Like, no, not at all. But now she says it's okay because the Biden administration gets it. They understand. They understand now the issue at hand. And if Congress, this is what she went on to say. She said, if Congress can just pass a bill that can lower the cost of the most important things that Americans spend money on. So if Congress can just pass a bill to lower the cost of prescription drugs and healthcare and utility bills, and if Congress can pass a bill to increase the use of renewable energy sources, then we can bring the price of energy down. Okay? So that's what she said. So before you give her credit for admitting she was wrong and missed inflation coming, which anyone could have seen, she's now prescribing more spending. And she didn't say she was really wrong about inflation. She said she didn't understand the severity of like the ports and Putin. She didn't say, yeah, I was wrong. Printing $13 trillion probably wasn't a great idea. She didn't admit being wrong about that. And you know she didn't admit being wrong about that because her news plan is to print even more money, to spend even more money on more things. How is the Biden administration going to lower the cost of prescription drugs? Well, they're going to pass a bill that will raise taxes or increase our debt or print more money to pay for them, which only causes more inflation. And they want to spend money on renewable energy, which will cost money and increase inflation. Earlier we talked about modern monetary theory. That's the new name that they've given this very old idea of printing money and spending money. You don't have to call it modern monetary theory, and our eyes are supposed to glaze over. And we're talking about brilliant. This is, it's a new idea. Ooh, it's great. Right? Here's another trick up their sleeve. They call it a new capital market mechanism. And your eyes are supposed to glaze over. You're supposed to be like, oh, great, a capital market mechanism, okay? Bear with me here, check this out. What is this new capital market mechanism? Underscoring the urgency of acting to stop global warming, this is Reuters. Janet Yellen at the climate conference in Scotland recently said the United States would join England in backing the climate investment funds, a new capital market mechanism. Okay, what is the climate investment funds? She said that this is a pivotal moment, decisive decade of climate action. Climate crisis is already here. Here's the quote. Rising to the challenge, this is Janet Yellen, will require the wholesale transformation of our carbon-intensive economies. It's a global transition for which we have an estimated price tag. Some have put the global figure between $100 and $150 trillion over the next 3 decades. At the same time, addressing climate change is the greatest economic opportunity of our time. It's wonderful that we're going to spend how much again? 150 trillion? Now, yes, that's around the world. So what's our chunk of it? 100? So during COVID, we spent 13 trillion. And look at the mess we're in for that. Now we're going to spend 100 or 150 trillion? And she calls it an opportunity. How great it is, how wonderful it is, and how it's going to solve all of our problems. These people cannot be trusted. And now because Yellen's no longer at the Fed, she can be a little more unleashed in other policy points, right? Working for Biden, and it's exposed what a hack she is. Here she is making the argument that we need abortion in America because of poverty.
Are of teenage women, particularly low income and often Black, who aren't in a position to be able to care for children, have unexpected pregnancies, and it deprives them of the ability often to continue their education, to later participate in the workforce. So there is a spillover into labor force participation, but it means that children will grow up in poverty and do worse themselves.
Thank you. Let me just say my time on the topic.
This is the truth.
I'll just simply say that as a guy raised by a Black woman in abject poverty, I'm thankful to be here as the United States.
Yeah, killing babies good for the economy. By the way, Justice Sotomayor and Clarence Thomas both grew up in abject poverty, like dirt floor, literal levels of poverty, and our Supreme Court justices. Good thing we got Roe v. Wade. Point is, got rid of Roe v. Wade. My point of playing that clip, it's not to talk about abortion. It's to show who these people are. These are not like Janet Yellen and Powell. These are not just people who have different ideas of economic policy than you and I may have. That's fine, of course. What they have are full-blooded ideologies. They have a completely different worldview than you, and it applies to everything from birthing people to abortion to the role of government in your lives, and therefore the role of not just the role of government in your lives, and also their control of not only the American but also the global economy. You have the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the Fed, and they all have the same vision for the world and therefore the vision of you. The Federal Reserve is infected with the same communist command and control values and wokeism as any other college campus or NPR newsroom or World Economic Forum breakout session. It's all the same. But nothing has as much influence over your life as the completely unelected and unaccountable Federal Reserve. So in conclusion, end the Fed. Hey, Slater Crusaders, you want to know why the economy is so terrible right now? You want to know why inflation is what it is? Because we have printed $13 trillion over just the last few years. That's more money than we've spent on all the wars, the 13 most expensive wars, all the wars in the last 20 years, all combined. We've printed that money. Of course, there's going to be inflation. Who enabled that? The Fed, the Federal Reserve. Who are these people? How could they get it so wrong? What's the history of the Fed? What got us to the point we're at right now? That's what we are going to understand in our latest special, The Federal Reserve Explained. And you can watch that right now. Even with inflation, our app, still free. TheFirstTV.com.